My guest today is Kanesha Adams, a former public school teacher and founder of the Learning Lounge, a tutoring center and new microschool in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, outside of Little Rock. I had a chance to visit Kanesha's program recently and to write about her experience as a school founder in my Forbes column, and I'm thrilled to have her with us today. Kanesha Adams, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Carrie.
It's so great to have you here. I just absolutely loved visiting the Learning Lounge and seeing this welcoming, joyful space that you've created for learners. And I want to talk about your founder story, but let's start a little bit before that with your own experience in education and what led you to decide to become a teacher.
Absolutely. So thanks again for having me, Carrie. If I date back about 12 years ago and introduce my experience education, I would say it was during my undergraduate experience at University of Arkansas Little Rock, where I was a McNair Scholar, and I began to conduct research on the inequities that existed in education. And as a junior at that time, I didn't have enough time to go back and make my major education. So I finished my undergraduate studies in criminal justice, and I went on to pursue a master's in education from Oklahoma State University, which is where I was also accepted into Teach for America and sent back to my home community of Pine Bluff to serve as a teacher. And so my background in education really started because I began to really see what was happening. And then I began to be a part of the solution as an educator. So I spent a couple years specifically in the classroom servicing Black and Brown students in rural communities like mine. And then after finishing Teach for America, I became an instructional specialist at my high school. So I was an instructional specialist at the school that taught me how to be a student, how to be a learner, but also just how to be a human being. And so um, I continued to just kind of, while doing that work, be really creative and outside of the box when working with students that looked like me. And I recall just a couple instances where I did that was in my classroom as a teacher. I remember vividly this experience because my students still talk about it, but we had glow in the dark math parties and our students loved it. And then my experience as an instructional coach when we were a part of ensuring that students read books that reflected who they were as people. And so my experience in education as a student and both as an educator, it looked a little differently, but I knew once I became an educator, I wanted to give students an experience that I would have wanted to have. And so after doing that work through the public side, I ended up thinking about how that work could be built. And I started building small companies, just like experimenting with non-traditional education experiences. So I built EduScape, where we did virtual escape rooms. And then I lost my sister and had to think about sending a kindergartner to school for the very first time. And as a new, I would say, mom slash aunt to a now kindergartner, we were traveling 25 miles to take her to school, and she just wasn't loving it every day. And so, because of that, my desire then became to create a space where students would love to come. And that's kind of how the Learning Lounge was born. The Learning Lounge, where the center of learning is love, because we want students to love learning. And so our goal is that we'll build this space, or we'll continue to build this space for our community for students to really love learning.
Oh, just amazing, Kanesha. Let's back up a little bit to your experience in K to 12 schooling, most of which was spent in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I think you said from third grade to 12th grade. Prior to that, you were in another public school district in Arkansas. Tell us about the demographics of Pine Bluff.
Pine Bluff is about 85 to 95% Black and brown. And I mean Black and brown by specifically African American population. Pine Bluff is a poverty stricken community. We have high crime. Um, our students, the majority of our schools are Title I schools. because again of the household income. And so our community, on that end of things, if we look at the demographics and what the system says about, our students and our students are coming from a poor community, a poor neighborhood, African American. Um, but on the flip side of it, our students, when we think about our community, Pine Bluff is a really rich community in history. There is a lot of amazing history in the city of Pine Bluff. And so the family structures are really strong and solid. And our community is also really rich in faith based. And so even though we have their odds against us, there are things that we have potential to really uplift and utilize as we build our families and our communities. And so this is the community I've always lived in. This is home for me. I was born and raised here. And so I've lived in the community with what the system has confined us to be, but I've also lived outside of the community to show what Pine Bluff and the potential that exists in Pine Bluff.
Mm. So I know you told me when I visited with you, Kanesha, that you love public schools and you loved living in Pine Bluff and going to school there, and love teaching in Pine Bluff in the public schools there. But you also came across a lot of constraints as an educator, that even though you were trying to be very innovative, be an intrapreneur, if you will, within the system, it wasn't always that easy. I wonder if you could talk about some of the constraints that you were under as a public school teacher.
Yes, absolutely. I love public schools. Again, as you stated, I love teaching. I love my community. But I remember a lot of times when we would, specifically, and I was talking about this actually last night. We had our second open house or informational meeting. And I was just listening and hearing from the parents, and there were just things that they wanted their students to learn and to know. And even specifically, if we think about faith-based instruction. That isn't something that you can just go into a public school and I can begin to teach my students about the power of prayer, like, or to encourage them to pray, right? And a lot of families in our community, that is their belief, like that is their lifestyle. And so we were not able to bring some of our students' lifestyles into the classroom, because of the system. Another thing was a lot of times, and this was something that really bothered me, in order to build culture around test taking and strong test takers, we would always reward kids who passed the test. And there are other issues and concerns that come with test taking for some students, like anxiety, right? Just all of those things that they may deal with, and those frustrations. And so we couldn't we it was hard for us to say we aren't teaching to the test, but it was also hard to not prepare and teach to the test when we had a student body that were 3 to 4 grade levels behind. It was really hard to do anything other than teaching or preparing for a test, which caused like creativity sometimes to go out of the window, because you didn't always have the opportunity to be a creative when you were focused on students passing this standardized test. And so those were some of the things that really bothered me, especially because I had a classroom where 9 out of 14 of my students had IEPs. And so passing the test was probably the least of their concern. So we had to talk about growth. Passing the test was the least of their parents' concerns. They wanted to talk about those kids being socially protected, socially safe, and supported at school. And that looks different, when you have the autonomy to build according to the student's needs and not according to a standardized assessment.
Yeah. So you, after public school, went and worked with an ed tech company, and were kind of coming at education from a different angle, kind of during the COVID time. You had mentioned to me that in that initial COVID calendar year, the 2020 to 2021 school year, you began to think about the idea of microschools. You had heard about Prenda, the National Microschooling Network, that was founded in 2018, but has seen substantial growth since then, of course, largely due to COVID and the disruption caused by that. And then tragically, you mentioned that your sister passed away in a car accident in early 2021, which caused you to table those microschool plans as you and your parents assumed guardianship of your young niece, who you mentioned started kindergarten this past fall, so the fall of 2023. And that was where you revisited the idea of creating a microschool and realizing that here you were driving many miles to another better public school district for her to attend kindergarten, and she still wasn't loving it. And you thought, kindergartners should love to learn. So that's when you said, I have to build it, I guess, right? So tell us a little bit about the initial vision of the Learning Lounge, which you opened in the fall of 2023 as a tutoring center. Tell us a little bit about what your plan was in the early days and how it's evolved.
So, you've really stated everything. Yeah, my sister and I, we looked at Prenda. My sister was a senior at our local university studying psychology. So her goal was eventually to become a school counselor, but she was going to be the teacher of our Prenda Micro School. And so the Prenda Guide at that time is what we were looking at and what they were called. And I was just going to be the facilitator, so like the administrator, to help it grow and to recruit students and to help build her capacity to talk about the way we were going to educate differently. While we were doing all of that, and then unfortunately, we lost my sister. And so again, right, I tabled it. And so when we came back to the idea of the Learning Lounge, the space in its original state, I had it in mind to be a micro school. I believe I always, right? When we got back to it, so my niece started school in August. October, we were having a grand opening for the Learning Lounge because between August and October, she was crying. We were driving. And again, Pine Bluff is my community. So I was able to find a space. I was able to work with the local chamber and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. But when we had our ribbon cutting or our opening was through the lens of this is going to be an after school tutoring space. And at that time, just like within a couple months, the Arkansas Learns Act kind of initiated the literacy tutoring grant. And so we applied to be a service provider. And so we were accepted to be a service provider on the basis that we would provide literacy tutoring to the students in our community who received that grant from the state. And so that's what we did. We began to market as this, we're going to just be an after school enrichment tutoring provider. But in that same realm, I was still building and learning about, okay, after this, how do we build and grow and become this micro school space by August of 2024? And so what we begin to do is this recruitment came, and we begin to service eight to 10 students after school, and they were coming in. And one of the very first families that we told, who's in our recruitment video, we told her we're thinking micro school after this, and she was a literacy tutoring grant recipient, and her mom said she's enrolling. And she went on video to say that her child enjoys the space. She feels safe. It feels like home. And so she's to this day one of our biggest recruiter, and not the mom, the student is. Like she anytime we get a new student that comes to the Learning Lounge, she asks them, are you coming to the Learning Lounge school in the fall? I am, and I'm really excited about it. And so when we begin to see families, as we begin to market this or do these small videos. We did a video and we put it on Facebook for about 15 days. And we begin to hear from parents of students who had identified disabilities that this is what we've been looking for and waiting for our students. We really begin to take the micro school thing seriously. I think in the beginning, it was just an idea. And I really didn't know or didn't believe that our school, our city would understand it or would buy into it, because we don't have a micro school. We're a small community in the southern part of the state of Arkansas. Micro schooling is very new. And so I really didn't know how our families would respond, because for what we always know, it has always been public school, right? And so doing something a little different was actually scary. But when we begin to see families reaching out and asking, how can I learn more? How can I be involved? We knew that this was the time, this was the space and the opportunity to really give parents the solution they were looking for.
Ah, just amazing. And tell us a little bit more, if you will, Kanesha, about the Learns Act, because um, Arkansas in 2023 became one of a growing list of states to implement universal education savings accounts, enabling all students in the state to access a portion of education funding to use toward a variety of education expenses. In the first year, that was just private schools, recognized private schools in the
Mhm.
state. That was this current academic year, 23 to 24. But micro schools are eligible to participate in 24 to 25, beginning this August, as you mentioned. Was that very much a part of your decision making to create a micro school?
100%. And I'll say 90% because the parents, of course, them knowing, but to actually move on it, 100% of our movement was because the funding became available. We don't have a private school in our community, and so even last year when the funding was available, our students, if they wanted to benefit from that type of funding, would have had to drive 45 miles to even get to a private school. And on top of all the other issues that I shared with you about our community, that was just almost impossible for several families. I mean, we have families who are working, we have families who are trying to meet their basic needs. And so that accommodation of being able to transport their students 45 miles to a private school to receive those funding, that wasn't available, right? And so in year two, when the opportunity to create a space that didn't have to be a private school, but to provide that opportunity, that access and equity to our students in our community, that was one of the reasons why I said, okay, yeah, we have the opportunity to do this. Parents are asking for it, and now there are no reasons as to why they can't get it because the funding is here. And so we begin to really encourage our families to sit down and learn about the funding and the opportunities, and to see that they were eligible, because some of the schools that our students are attending are rated D and F schools. And so that those are some of the eligibility criteria. But even in addition to that, as I stated earlier, some of our students who have IEPs and are just wanting a smaller learning environment, they have disabilities that are causing them to not thrive as well as they should or could. And those are the parents who are saying, give me what you got, and whatever I can do to fund it and finance it and make it happen for my child, tell me that so I can do it. And so when the Learns Act officially allowed us on April 1st to apply to be a service provider. In addition to that, all of my parents begin to apply to receive the vouchers to support their students. And so, without that, we wouldn't have been able to really even think about how to make this vision count or make this vision happen for our students, because we know our families at this time, they can't fund a private tuition based opportunity. But this does not mean that they don't deserve it. They definitely deserve it. But unfortunately, for all the issues that may exist, funding it is just not an opportunity for them. But I believe if they could, they would, and this is giving them the opportunity to do it.
That's so great. And so you've been running the Learning Lounge, as you mentioned, as a tutoring program after school for students, and became a recognized provider for the tuition funding for that as part of the Learns Act. And now you're have applied to be a micro school provider, which you're confident you'll be able to get because, again, you had the tutoring provider status. And so Tell us a little bit, if you will, about the structure of the program as you envision it for August. So all of the families will be recognized as homeschoolers
Mhm.
attending your micro school. So they'll have that freedom and flexibility. But what is sort of your vision for the micro school this fall? What are you hoping for?
Yes, so I'm super excited about what we are building. Last night we had our second informational meeting, and we were able to talk to a few parents who we didn't talk to the first time. And I'm going to be honest, if I could start it today, I would start today because there are so many the families are ready. Let's just say that. But because there's a process for them to apply for the intent to homeschool and the school year is almost ending, they have to wait until the fall. And not just in one community. I've talked to 3 communities at this point, and they're like, we are watching what you're doing, we are seeing what you're doing. Our community doesn't even have a school, and we have 50 to 70 students who are being bused because our school was consolidated 12 years ago. Would you consider bringing a learning lounge here? Last week, I had a meeting with another community, and they were like, we have a farm, it's 3 acres. We would love to have a micro school farm. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is beautiful to see that education can be done differently for the students who need it. Like I said on last night, and I like to say this because I believe a lot of times it becomes a battle between public versus private versus, you know, um, alternative education opportunities. I say this with so much pride and joy. Our solution may not be for everybody, but it is for somebody. Every product, service, or business has an audience, and we have an audience. We are not in competition with any educational opportunity. We are an opportunity for the families and the students that believe that this is going to work. And so for me, that is the lane and the lens in which I communicate because a lot of times when we begin to have these conversations about education, it becomes a this versus that, and not this is for the student. I believe in education done right for the student, and there is an educational experience that every student desires and every family deserves. And so that's what I believe. And so my vision for the fall is that we will bring this small group of families together, and we will build this vision of love through really faith-based. I believe that students can come to our school and be authentically whoever they are, and we have to cultivate that. What I'm watching and I'm noticing and I'm learning even as I will say even as my tutoring students are the families that I will service in the fall. And I'm learning so much about their personalities and how they need more social structures. They are academically really gifted. They want more social structures. And so for the fall, that is what we're building. We're building our field trips to help them be more exposed to things outside of Pine Bluff. Like some of our students have never been outside of Pine Bluff. Like there is life outside of Pine Bluff. And so our vision is monthly field trips because I believe exposure is everything and exposure creates opportunities. Our students will have worship on Wednesdays, and so we will bring in a local minister to help facilitate our worship classes. Our students will have yoga and meditation because we know the power of having them really think about mindfulness and know how to manage their thoughts, their feelings. And we will have specials every day. And so our specials may be a little different than like a traditional public school specials because worship will be a specials, meditation will be a specials. We have a local tap teacher who's going to teach tap as a special. And another thing I believe that I am and we have a local chef who's going to teach culinary as a special. So another thing that I think is really powerful about what we're doing is we are introducing them to local business owners through an entrepreneurship lane as well. So they're learning about their neighbors on their community at school and being introduced to their work, their business, their product, and their services, and that'll be their specials. And so I believe we are building a community micro school because our community leaders are going to lead our specials.
Mm.
And so we're excited, really excited about our core instruction will be K2 will have their room, and then 3-5 will have their room. Last night we were asked if we would go beyond fifth grade, and I was like, oh my God, you guys want beyond fifth grade? And so our vision originally was kindergarten through fifth grade, but we have about 5 students that are in sixth through eighth grade, and their families are like, we want this too. And so right now we are just really thankful that the community has supported us. And we're really just grateful that people are, seeing the need first in their own homes, and then they're looking for a solution and they're running behind it, and not just saying I have to be content where I am when they know something else may be a little better.
Oh, just so much demand there. I think you're going to be busy expanding the Learning Lounge to many other communities and higher grades, middle school and potentially high school too. It just seems like there's so much eagerness for models like this, which are really individualized. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the kind of core content. I imagine your experience not only as a teacher, but also in with your tutoring students, that you're really accustomed to individualized learning and figuring out where each child is at academically and kind of tailoring learning to them. So wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. And then also these students are homeschoolers, but they're able to attend full time the micro school if they choose. Is that right?
Yes, so our students, again, will sign the intent to be homeschool students. The majority of them will come Monday through Friday. So we will be a substitution to what their traditional public school experience would be. And so 7:45 to 3:30, and we will continue to provide aftercare, but it will only be for the enrolled students. So we won't
Mm.
do an open aftercare like we currently do, which means that right now we have students from all school districts. In the fall, our aftercare will just extend the day experience for our families. And what we're learning, as a public school teacher, we would have 25 third graders in our classroom, but we would probably be teaching anywhere from kindergarten to sixth grade, right? Because of the intervention needs and the enrichment opportunities. And so sometimes that was challenging because I had to teach third grade content.
Mm.
Right. I was a third grade teacher. I had to teach third grade content. And of course, as a teacher, you learn how to modify and adjust and support those needs as you see fit or as you can. But sometimes it's challenging because, as I stated earlier, those third graders were going to be assessed on a third grade state test. So we had to make sure they mastered those skills. Well, when I think about my micro school and my experience as what we're doing at the Learning Lounges, we're looking at individual needs. Where are you? The system may say you are a third grader, but unfortunately, you haven't mastered kindergarten skills. So we're going to intervene on your behalf so that you can show growth. And then we're going to, we're able to kind of move you to the small group that you need to be at when you're ready. And so in my after school space, we do a lot of centers, a whole lot of centers. And so in the centers, even yesterday, we had a kindergartner by term in a center with a third grader, and they were learning together, peer-to-peer teacher. But these students were by term in the grade level, but we were just really building their skills at where they were. Individualized support. This is where you are. These are what the skills that we're going to build. And students, what we've learned is that students like to feel that they are accomplishing something. And so if you have a third grader who is not able to do the work because they still haven't mastered some of those skills, that third grader may become frustrated or, anxious because they're struggling, because they really need you to go back to where they are and teach and build where they are. Another thing that we've learned is that our students love like textile. They love building.
Mm.
So the other day we were building a bird keeper. And then we went outside and we talked about animal habitats and we talked about the different type of birds. When we were talking about the eclipse, it was so beautiful because we were talking about the eclipse to students from kindergarten to fifth grade. And when we came back yesterday, we asked every student to tell us about the eclipse in their own words and to hear how all of them experienced it. We gave everybody, their support, but to hear how all of them experienced it because we talked about it and we had talked about it using Oreo cookies, right? And then we ate Oreo cookies. Our students felt more connected, number one, to each other. They felt more connected to the content, and they felt that because we were kind of asking them at their own individual levels how they experienced it, what they took away from it. They felt good because they were able to say it in their own experience. And so my biggest hope is that we will again be able to service the students based on where they are so that we can have true growth, not based on a standard that all of them may not have what it takes to meet yet, because they're missing some skills.
Right. I mean, it seems so common sense, right, Kanesha, that
Yes.
not every third grader is going to be on third grade level. There's a whole bunch of variety in the human experience, and meeting students where they're at that moment, which could be advanced in some areas and potentially not in others, and that's okay. And kind of meeting them where they're at and seeing growth seems to be, again, such common sense. So it's great to see that others realize that too in your community and are seeking you out and want their children in that environment, and that other communities in Arkansas recognize the value of what you're building and want you to grow there too. So as we begin to wrap up, Kanesha, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about what's next. I mean, I know you haven't even opened the doors of the micro school, but it seems like pretty quickly you're going to have to think about scaling and opening additional learning lounges throughout Arkansas. What do you think that process will be like?
Honestly, my hope, and this is really what I believe I am doing, my hope is that we will be able to operate learning lounges across the state of Arkansas, and I will become like this facilitator that coaches other leaders, educational leaders, former educators who want to build something like this in their community. They will be a learning lounge, but they may be the administrator or the lead teacher. And in our we will be like the headquarters. We'll be the space in which they come and we help them build their curriculum, sustain their curriculum, help them recruit, show them, this is the formula for the learning lounge. And would you like to be a learning lounge? And this is what it means. And then there are other learning lounges across the state. I already have two teachers who are wanting to start their own learning lounges by August. And so they are applying for the VILA right now.
The Vela grant. Wow.
They
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, they are
Amazing.
applying for the VALA grant right at this moment, and I am helping them through like, the application and sharing with them what I've learned about my process. But because they've seen how I build it, they want it to be a learning lounge. I've even shared them, if you want it to be a Kelly's corner or Carrie's corner, you can do that, but they want a learning lounge. They like the name of it. They like what we've built, what we're embodying so far, and they want to be a part of this learning lounge family. And so I do believe that within the next year there will be 1 to 3 learning lounges in the state of
Wow.
Arkansas. And that wasn't what I thought when I began, but I am just so excited that other even educators, right? First families see the power and parents see the power, but now other educators are seeing the power in their skill set, their community, and then the needs of their students. And they're responding to it. And so I'm excited to see how we grow. I believe it would be nice to have a learning lounge, maybe 5, and then we're able to operate together as a little family and
Mm,
support 200 families across the state. I think that would be beautiful,
wow.
just to kind of see what that could look like.
Well, I have a feeling, Kanesha, that more people will want what you're building. And so you may find that you have even more demand and more learning lounges. So get ready, because I think that what you're building is just so beautiful and so needed. And so kudos to you for taking that entrepreneurial leap to be a micro school founder and now a network of micro schools. So if my listeners and viewers want to learn more about the Learning Lounge, follow your progress and expansion, support your efforts, what is the best way for them to do that?
So we're on social media platforms. So we are on Facebook as the Learning Lounge. And you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram as the Learning Lounge. Our website is the Learning Lounge AR .com. And it's interesting that you asked that because I begin to add AR and the state to our link before I knew that we could be the Learning Lounge TX, or we could, I
Yeah.
didn't think about the Learning Lounge Texas. So the Learning Lounge AR is our Facebook, excuse me, as our website. And so you can find us there, and there is a way to contribute to our efforts on there. Um, the Learning Lounge AR at gmail.com is our email. And so you're welcome to email me or reach out to us if you have any questions about what we're doing, how we're building, or if you want a learning lounge in your space, you can reach out to me and through email as well.
I love that. And I look forward to many more domain names of the Learning Lounge TX and the Learning Lounge, TN and all over. It'll be great to see national scalability potentially for the Learning Lounge. It's certainly such a wonderful idea and vision that you have. So best wishes to you, Kanesha Adams, and thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you, Carrie, and continue to do great work for those of us who are supporting our students.